Evening, sir. All right, ready, hack. July 20th, 2023. The regular Wasilla Airport Advisory Commission is called to order at 1800. Before we begin, commissioners, please put away any cell phones. If you have personal business to attend to, please move to the recess area. If you're participating, Mr. McCabe, telephonically, please mute your phone unless speaking. When speaking, state your name for those streaming the meeting. As a reminder, all attendees, meetings being streamed live. The camera is located directly in the back of the council chambers. Roll call.
Aaron McCarty.
Here.
Charles Morris.
Present.
Michael Lucas. James Grogan.
Here.
Kevin McCabe.
Present.
Thank you. If you could lead us there, Mr. Morris, in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? All right. Any objections? No changes? Without objections, it passes. And next for the minutes. Regular meeting minutes. Does the committee have any adjustments to the March 16th, 2023 meeting minutes presented? All right, no changes. The meetings will be stand as presented. I do need a motion to approve those meeting minutes.
I approve to, or I, what is it called? Move to approve the minutes as presented.
Moved and seconded. Any objections? With no objections, the meeting minutes are approved. With that, we'll begin with a report from the famous Public Works Director, Mr. Schaal.
So the topics that we'll discuss in new business will really kind of serve for my staff report, so I'll just wait till then.
Okay. Ms. Nygard?
Wait.
Thank you, ma'am. Zipping right through here for the nice weather. Unfinished business. Airport study rate is on hold until after the HDL can show and do for a future meeting.
Comments first.
You what? Not till next, because we're not doing the HDL comments.
Item 7.
Yeah, I thought we were doing the...
I'll have to call it.
Okay. Public comments. Please, sir. You make sure you sign in and state your name, sir.
Need a pen here.
That would help.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Doug Kelch Palmer. I'd just like to comment on a comment I heard at the last meeting here that I think it was Mr. Grogan who made this comment that he said, "Hey, I'm just absolutely convinced that we need an airport supervisor." And I'd say before we get a job description, that would be, if I was running a business and somebody said we needed somebody, I would expect the next words out of my mouth, at least in the Air Force, would be, where's the job description for that? And if you think about the job description for an airport like this, I think there was a lot of talk about the security of the airport, and that the airport manager would be running the security and be doing gate checks. Well, I think if you hire a guy who's qualified to do the things you want to do as an airport manager, the important things about development, that takes a lot of brain and experience in the industry. You got that guy running around doing security checks, he's going to last about a week. Or you're going to hire somebody who's happy to do security checks and he's not going to be capable of doing the things you really need to expand the thing smartly and take some of the lifting off the staff. So I'm a little concerned that we're putting the cart before the horse when we identify that we need to, especially in a fiscally austere environment like we talked about last time, that we're immediately going to hire somebody and then figure out something for them to do. And I don't think Aaron runs his business like that. You generally get somebody, you have a need, and then you hire somebody to fill it. You don't hire somebody and then figure out what they're going to do, because they either end up unhappy or they're extremely underqualified to do what you want them to do. So anyhow, I just wanted to make sure that was on the record, that I was kind of fundamentally surprised that that would be brought up in a way that way. And maybe I misunderstood, but I just want to make sure that we're we're thinking things through before we do, which I'm sure you do, but again, this is my only chance for public comment. Thank you very much.
Any other public comments? Okay, now we'll proceed to unfinished business. HDL, we're on hold for new business, comprehensive economic study strategy, CEDs. Yes, Nygard.
Ashley, can you put those up? The slides?
They're in the packet.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
What's that?
You wanted sorry?
Wow.
That first basket right there says agenda.
I just want people to be able to follow along. You over here?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to bring everybody up to date on a project that we've been working on for a year. Coming from the private sector, I thought it was really important that we put some economics behind these ideas and have at least a 5-year blueprint on what are the priorities, not only for the city, but to ask our regional partners where they see the priorities. So we embarked on doing what they call a SEDS, or it's a comprehensive analysis of where you're going to chart your future going forward. And the reason I brought it to this commission specifically is that it confirmed to us that the airport is a priority for the region. And why that's important is when we go talk to different agencies, whether it's USDA for expanding our water and our power or fiber, or it's EDA to expand available lots for hangars to develop those, they want to see and they want you to demonstrate that you've thought through that, just like a business loan application or a business plan, that there's been some thought behind it and it's not just opinions. So this has been passed by the council and it has been submitted to EDA, and we got a preliminary verbal approval to go ahead and start executing on some of those priorities. So I wanted you to be familiar when you hear this in the public, the SEDS, that is really our business plan going forward. In these slides, they talk a lot about the process. We hired McKinley Research to do it. They've done these for a lot of cities in the state. And they said the unique thing about this region is we have the workforce, we need the employers. That's a unique situation for a lot of cities in Alaska where they have seasonalities or they have large companies pull out, like Kenai Peninsula when you have an LNG plant close. So not only are they saying, where are you today, but they want you to think through what happens if your main employer pulls out. How are you going to keep workers working? So the process is to understand where you are right now and then get your stakeholders involved. So we did 2 summits where we had over 100 people come and share their ideas. And then we did a study on where are our strengths and how can we play on our strengths and improve our weaknesses. But we found that the overall document, which I shared with the council tonight, whether you're talking to a banker or you're talking to a regional partner, you can say, this is the city that my business is in and this is what our 5-year plan is. And it really does give or lends itself to some good conversations. So the steering committee was formed, and on page 14 you'll see that it was a variety of people. The EDA likes to see 90% private sector engagement in this process. And the reason being is that they look at this tool as a partnership, whether you are going to develop an airport or you're going to write a regulation at the airport. They want to know the private sector is constantly giving you feedback. And that's really important to have a steering committee that's comprised of different disciplines. On the next page is the process that is pretty basic when you're doing these plans, but also lends itself to get very clear on what role your assets are going to play. So you did the SWOT analysis, what's our goals and the objective, and then what action are we going to take to evaluate where we're at. I can tell you that the appropriation we got from the state, from the governor, through the Department of Commerce, was they were very excited about our commitment to extending that runway. And they were excited to get this too. So on page 16, you'll see that everybody agrees our location, you have to go through Wasilla somehow, whether you're going to Fairbanks or you're over in Palmer, you come to Wasilla. So our location lends itself to be good, as well as we're business friendly and we have a really good financial, we have good financial strength right now with no debt and good liquidity. So we're a good partner. Our weakness is obviously traffic congestion and our community infrastructure, which is your water, your wastewater, and your power. We have a section by the airport that does not have power. Somehow, some way, it just missed a section of the airport. So we have to pull power in from Clapp Road, go under a creek, and go to the other side so the commercialization of large hangars can have power and water. So that's pretty essential. And then a lack of city planning was the other one, and that is to be very clear with your market with what the rules are and that they're not changing. And that plan should be co-authored by the private sector and the public. The next page is the opportunities, and you'll see the airport was the top opportunity that the public said, yes, that is our greatest asset. Let's move that forward. Tourism, we really have been a cheeseburger and a tank of gas for a long time. And now we're getting a train, we fixed that train depot. We're in conversation with the railroad, but let's look at that as an opportunity. And then once again, city planning came up for growth. If you're gonna grow, we wanna have reasonable regulations and common sense. Otherwise, we probably shouldn't turn our open sign on for open for business. And the threats is over-regulations, anti-development policies, and one road in and one road out. So those were the weakness, or those were the threats that are saying this is why you're not growing. This next page is really interesting. So this was the vision everybody came up. Wasilla is a resilient community with future-ready infrastructure that supports a strong business hub, quality jobs growth, and unparalleled opportunities to explore the outdoors and raise a family. We spent an hour talking about raise a family. Some people were very hesitant to put that in there. And others were saying, do we want to say resilient or independent? So it just tells you how much language plays into this. We should be able to tell our children what we look like. And so this is our vision, quality job growth, and this unparalleled opportunities to explore the outdoors. This is where we could attract private jets to come in to go to Hatcher Pass, or fishing guides or hunting guides, or that's a whole nother market we have been intention about. I'm not going to go through the rest of the slides because it's really nice out and I know everybody wants to get outside, but use this to review. So our first goal is to improve our infrastructure to support economic resiliency. We can't go promote the hospitality industry of bringing hotels here if we cannot flush toilets. So that is really critical that we have the infrastructure necessary to support the industry. So we listed the 4 main priorities that we have. The second goal is to diversify our local economy so we're not shipping our workforce off all over the state. If we're not we ship gravel, we ship workforce all over the state. It's time to bring the jobs and employers here, and it seems like when our neighbors have assembly meeting, we get more business, so that's a good thing. We'll just keep bringing employers this way. And the last is improve community connections to promote the residents' well-being. I mean, everybody is seeing that this COVID, post-COVID, whatever you want to call it, people are wanting to get out, they're wanting to connect, they're wanting to do things. So we don't have a community development component to the city. So we partner with different companies like People's Paper, and they put on the music in the park. We're going to continue to reach out and ask the partners, what do you want to have at the train depot? What do you want to have at the airport? And have them bring their talent with them. And the last few pages is really how do you put this into action, because like a business plan, if it sits on the shelf, it probably isn't doing any good. We have to make sure that we're constantly measuring. And how it applies to the airport is, we want to attract a highly skilled workforce. And a lot of the talent that keeps the aviation industry going every day as mechanics and part manufacturers and painters, and we could be that aviation center of the state. We want to enhance our food security programs. There's a lot of, we talked to Delta Junction a couple weeks ago about some food security people down here that could use a product that they have and refine it and ship it off for dog manufacturers. And so we could be the conduit for providing some of the food security systems, and then really to communicate and collaborate with all the regional partners. So I talked about water. Water goes beyond Wasilla. Palmer has water. We're doing a project to connect those two systems by the hospital so we have backup pressure in case of an emergency. That's not only good for the city, it's good for the airport and good for other regional partners. So wanted to keep you guys up to date. As soon as we get approval from EDA that your guys' set is approved, as you look for funding for the airport, this is just one vehicle that you can use. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Projects, expansions, and updates, Mr. Schaal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll just kind of preface the next 4 items, 9.2 through 9.5, just a time to update, so kind of an extended staff report. So that's kind of what this format's going to be. So under 9.2, projects and expansion updates, I wanted to kind of make you aware of some of the stuff that's been happening around the airfield this summer and things that we're going to keep working on. You may have noticed this spring that we regraded Stoll. Get a thumbs up from the crowd. So a little bit of insight into that. My understanding is last few years we've had a maintenance contract that the labor portion of it ate into a lot of our material costs, so we weren't able to bring in as much gravel as we wanted to. So our roads/airport staff was really excited to leverage their labor instead of the contractors and have our order our own gravel. And so we put all of the funds that we had set aside for that into the gravel, basically. So you'll see that it's tuned up more than normal because our staff has been using their in-house skills and equipment to do that. So we got, I think, 3 times the amount of gravel that we had been placing in the last couple of years. They wanted to get more, and I think we'll do it again next year to get to the level of maintenance they wanted to get to. It was kind of, they had allotted a certain amount of time, and they needed to use up every minute of that. So they did a great job. I think they were able to manage some of the vegetation that was kind of getting a little thicker on the sides. They were able to grade that off and really get some good gravel down there. So hopefully everyone enjoys that the rest of the summer and during the winter operations. They are out completing a seal coat project. So we hired an asphalt subcontractor with a truck that applies seal coat out of the spray on the back. And before they did that, they did some spot weed removal on some of the cracks that have formed. After the seal coat, they'll be doing some crack sealing where they need to. So you should be seeing, when you go out there, some nice dark black areas. In case you heard about it, we did run into a wind event at the end of the seal coating, and there were a few airplanes that got a little spattering on their tails. So that was because of the weather change right at the end of that day's work. So we've been working with those handful of affected patrons to remove that as we could. The next day we instituted more control with actually a person following next to the spray bar with a big sheet of cardboard when we were close to the planes. To keep moving but not give anyone a new paint job on the next day.
Did you charge extra for that?
It was,
Paint job?
yeah, right. Buffed it out. We are also working on, so now getting into kind of bigger projects and more on the contracting side. We are very close to issuing a contract to update the markings on the airfield. And that's with the FAA's funding too, so we've been communicating with them on the bid documents, but soon we will have a bid out on the streets to have painting suppliers touch up some of the markings. I don't think it covers the whole airfield because of the limited amount of FAA match money, but this is one of those opportunities where the FAA needs to spend their funding for the year, the allocation, and we're working on better communication, being a non-DOT managed airport. They said, we've got some money, we don't think it's going to get spent, what can you pull together? And so the markings is a more simplistic contract put out, so we're going to be leveraging a little bit of extra cash that the FAA wasn't able to spend, and that should really improve some of our markings. We will be going into the fall with another bid in the streets for the next phase of Apron E expansion. That is the last bit of the hill to the north end of the field where we have the electrified tie-down spots. And so there'll be, I think that project adds another 25 tie-downs. And the goal is to get a contractor on contract before the weather really turns this winter, because we want them to get a little work started, and we want them to be on site throughout the winter so that they can get going in the spring when most contractors are locked out because of weight restrictions. So we'd really like to see them do something this fall, but then be ready to start working that month when you can't get your heavy equipment around, so you might as well get ahead on that project. So we're hopeful that that is enticing, because because that opportunity should mean that we see some relief in the contract amounts, because MOB should be a little cheaper. At least that's the hope. We have received some state funding through the governor and our Valley legislators for about $5 million to the airport. And so that money is extremely useful for leveraging match, and it allows us to get ahead of some of the costs for the airport that the FAA may not support, or just takes too long to get support from. So it's earmarked for the runway extension, and it has quite a bit of leniency to it. So some of the things that we anticipate using it for are initial design permitting sort of things to get us with a work plan that leverages all of our cash and the FAA match. We have a couple options. We could move ahead with the extension that takes us to 4,000 feet, just a 300-foot extension, or we could move to the 5,100-foot extension design. That extension requires some easements, some property acquisition. That is something the FAA makes painful if we ask them to pay for it, so that money is a very good candidate to deal with it outside the FAA and just handle it locally like we do with other things. So that's one of the top things we'll do. The SEDS is also a very important partner in the next few steps, because EDA is excited to be a partner in the airport expansion as well. So we're kind of strategizing on which avenues are most appropriate for leveraging all of these complementary desires for the expansion of the airport. And then, as Ms. Nygard said, the new hangars are very important, especially on the east side of the runway. If you're familiar with where a lot of the fill went that was created when Aviation Way was built, it was trucked around the end of the runway and leveled out on the east side between the airfield and Nygard. That's been envisioned as the commercial side of the airport for a long time. We anticipate a design profile with much larger hangars, and so they're going to need major utilities, major electrical, major water. They're going to need an access road. It's time for us to start putting some projects out to start to develop that, because the infrastructure is going to take a while to get moving, and so we need to start planning for that. And I don't know when we'll get to the point of building hangars, but we definitely do not want a major developer or a major entity to come to Wasilla and say, hey, I'll put a hangar up today. And they're like, we're gonna need 2 years to get you water, but we're working on it. So it's going to be a top priority as we move forward. It also plays into the master plan, which is underway right now with HDL. In new business 9.1, I'm sorry, in new business, unfinished business 8.1, HDL is still gonna come present the current process of the master plan. They were waiting on the forecast to be solidified. We really tried to talk to every user or potential user out there to make sure that the forecast is correct. And so that process took longer than we expected, but it was as thorough as we needed to be. So we'll expect a presentation from them next month. I think that's about it for, well, let me talk about the larger parcel. So we have, what are the 2 roads to go to the airport? We've got the airport,
Museum Drive?
yeah, Museum Drive. So we've got Airport Way and Museum Drive. There's a parcel that is to the southwest of Museum Drive that city owns, 70-something acres. I know there's a ton of interest in developing that. That property has some preliminary ideas for lease lot sizes, got some preliminary plans for a taxiway connection. We want to use the material in that parcel because it's got some uplands to it that aren't useful for, they need to bring it down so it's level with the field basically, but that material needs to be moved in a strategic way for the runway extension. It had been talked for a long time that we would use that as match with the FAA so that we maybe don't have to bring as much cash to the table. But what we're seeing with the master plan is that the FAA says that the class of airplanes that we have don't warrant the expansion, which is fine because they're not a build it and they will come entity. So we need to just build it anyway. And so we just need to be strategic about which side of the field we develop for hangars next. I think that the 70-acre parcel is going to be similar in hangar size as the existing hangar locations along the neighborhood, basically the 4 taxi lanes. So if we're looking for growth, it's my position that we want to look at the commercial side first, or do it at the same time at least. So anyway, we're going to be balancing that as the in priority as the master plan solidifies here in the next couple months. The plan is to have it pretty well organized by October, November-ish, early November-ish, so that we're done before December. We want to have it comments in and have it presentable to the council, just like the SEDS that Ms. Nygard brought to us. So we also talked a little bit about, in Ms. Nygard's presentation, about commercial users outside the airport, but in the same general region. The airport and the neighboring properties are really the only industrially zoned areas in the city. And so there's to the south, across the creek, there is a borrow pit that's almost done for being useful for that. And so that owner is looking at converting that to commercial space, lay down areas, maybe a logistics center, whatever businesses they can find that are cohesive there. But we are partnering with them and MEA to get that electrical connection. Both in electrical service and water service, loops are super important. You need to be able to feed from 2 directions in case there's a problem in between. And so that electrical service that is not existing on CLAP will be very useful for that property owner, but also us on the other side of the creek. And so we've been working on that. We hope to have some progress, some beneficial progress here in the next couple weeks. We've been applying with MEA to FEMA for that because of its resiliency benefits. That's all I can really think of right now for project and expansion updates. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
I may have missed it there, Mr. Did you get a time when HDL is gonna give us this then? Next month, next year?
The presentation?
Yeah.
It's next month at a regular scheduled meeting. We've
Right.
delayed them twice so far.
3 times, right?
2 or 3 times.
It's the third, so, all right. Anybody else? Questions? No?
It's the intent to move the hill to the other side of the runway, is that where that material's going?
Speaking about the apron E expansion,
Right, when we're taking the hill down at this time, it goes to the other side of the runway for the commercial side?
no. The commercial side is close enough that it really just needs the finishing touches with a structural section of a couple of feet of rock, basically. The Apron East project that will start this fall is going to bring the material to the south end of the runway,
Okay,
the expansion of the runway length.
so that's part of the expansion of the runway, okay.
Correct. Yeah, it'll be unclassified fill off.
Anybody else? All right, so this one's oddly self-serving. Wings over Wasilla 9.3. So before I start on that one, full disclosure, I just took over as the executive director for the Museum of Alaska. And that would be the nonprofit that was going to take over the Wings over Wasilla fly-in, air show, etc. So my discussion on the Wings over Wasilla would be we need to put together, my understanding is, a resolution to get the city, the money that we had raised 3 years doing that air show as a committee, different committee, was absorbed back into the city. So we would make a resolution, I'm understanding, to ask for that money back, be given to the nonprofit, which in this case would be the museum. And then we would start doing those air shows again yearly to show off our airport and make our airport one of those showcase places again. So for 9.3 Wings over Wasilla, if you guys have any discussion, my input is that we need to get a resolution that we can present to the city council to get that monies back or invested in the air show.
Yeah, so if I can speak to that a little bit, I've chatted with the finance director a little bit, and there is an amount, she didn't know off the top of her head, that had been collected above the seed money, if you will, that the city provided in years past. So I think one of the first steps would be to set up a meeting with her and I, and we could go over what exists of that balance, and then we could work through the process if that's still something that is going to take place. And so she can put dollars and cents behind what the council had kept for safekeeping, I guess you could say. Start it back up.
Yeah, I can tell you, it's just under $14,000. Does the rest of the advisory board have any thoughts of doing an air show or wanting to keep that going or not?
I'd like to see it happen, yeah.
I would be in favor of that.
Okay.
To just another, I feel like it kind of fits in with, the goals of inviting community into activities and promoting things that are important for Wasilla.
Right.
Is this the Museum of Transportation that's right there? Or this
Yeah, the one is just 0.1 miles down the road from the museum, yeah, or from the airport.
Exactly.
You what?
So that way people will know there's an airport out here.
Yes,
Okay.
if I can make a comment for structure, I think what would be wise is to set up a meeting, in the next couple weeks, and then that would give time to understand what the balance is basically, and then identify the structure and the way to move forward. The city's, obviously, as an entity is preparing for events big and small. So big would be the Arctic Winter Games coming up, right? And so they've shown that community events are super important to them, and they put their money where their support is. And so there's some framework to say the city agrees that we want this sort of thing, and so there's a process that's been laid out a few times now. And so by understanding that, we could work through this committee and back to the council basically to solidify that support both monetarily and through resolution of support and through the other mechanisms of leadership that the city uses. So I recommend that Mr. Grogan, you set up a meeting in the next couple weeks so there's time to make it work, and it can be ready to talk about if there's a resolution of support. Do I need another one? I just need like 3. Just give me a bank of them. So that we have the structure we need for the next meeting, you know, if that's the timeline you want. But I think have a meeting with the finance director and I, and then we can figure out the structure for the meeting that you want to bring it to.
So a quick question for that one for you then, do we need to have the board for the open acts, all that kind of stuff, or judges?
No, because it's just a structural thing,
Okay.
right? It's
Yep.
and it'll come in front of the public and have all the notice that needs to happen. It's just kind of working out the roadmap that the council is used to, so that it lines up with the way they want to see things brought to them. So we can handle that amongst ourselves and then bring it to the board and so the public can see it.
All right, we'll table that then for the next, I'll get that done. Any other inputs for that? Okay, 9.4, airport rules and airport manager. Discussions on that.
Yes, I'll start that. So, the public comment tonight was good and I agree with the fact that there needs to be structure that explains what an airport manager would do and why we need one, and, you know, where the funding's gonna come from. I think this kind of touches on the SEDS too. So the city's in a very enviable spot compared to other cities about revenue and savings. And so, right, and so, you know, now I would say to any group, like the Airport Advisory Commission, the task is to say to the council, or at least 4 of them, you know, hey, this is a need, this is valuable to the community, we need to move ahead with this. And so if we talk about funding an airport manager, right now that position doesn't exist, and there's no funding for that person, but the city council can agree within a couple meetings to say, make that happen, here's the funding. They don't have to say, where will we get the money? They have it in the general account. You know, all they have to do is say, we're moving it from the general account into the airport enterprise, fund this position. So that's great. That's not that hard. That's just building a coalition of support, you know, and then, but you do need to understand what your goal is. And so I kind of paired airport rules with airport manager because they go hand in hand. And so if the user group of the airport, you know, the community at the airport says, I don't want any rules, don't come down here with rules, then they're probably not going to be receptive to an airport manager. But if the community has kind of a general feeling of, we need a little bit more rules, or we need people to understand why they're here and what's reasonable and what's not reasonable, then I think that's a good litmus test that an airport manager would be well received. I don't want a position where an airport manager's position, the job description is figured out, hired, and then they start to do their job and say, here's the rules as are understood by the airport users, and then everyone says, wait a minute. That's too strict. Or what do you mean I have to, I'll give you an example. What do you mean I just arrived and I have to come check in with you and you'll tell me where my tie down is? I'll go where I want. This is Alaska. I can find my own spot. Like, that's the kind of management I'm talking about, is if we are going to give the users and the visitors the same experience, there's going to need to be some kind of general understanding of what the airport manager's role is. It's more than security. It's to build, in my mind, it's to help I think of it like guardrails. There is an ideal use, an ideal reason to be at the Wasilla Airport, and if everyone agrees on it, then the rules and the manager are just the guardrails when a few users kind of veer off the general path, you know. But if it's too narrow, then too many users say, this isn't what we want. And if it's too broad, then, you know, incongruent activities aren't dealt with. And I think they're kind of too broad right now. There's some incongruent activities that need to be shored up. So, anyway, that's my soapbox.
Yeah. Would it be something where we could look at some of the rules that other airports have, or to put together a list of, instead of running right to an airport manager and saying, figure it out, it would be something that we could kind of step into it with at least defining a base set of rules and seeing how the community responds to essentially setting up boundaries and seeing how well they follow boundaries, and in a sense almost see if the community will essentially self-police for a period of time and see how well that works. If it doesn't seem to work, then have the discussion about an airport manager, but at least start with a process of at least defining what some of the rules will be, at least the general ones that make sense. Dogs on the taxiway without leashes, and cars driving up and down the runway. Like, just define the bare minimum that we need to function, and then add to that as needed.
Yeah, I think that would be a very wise way to incrementally hedge up on it.
Okay, well, I'm going to jump in here both feet because I've got a huge list, and I very much appreciate, Mr. Couch, your comments on that. We got comments coming back up, so you can 3 minutes for rebuttal. But you don't. People are talking about putting the cart before the horse. We're not putting the cart before the horse. We have to train the horse how to pull the cart, and that's a simplistic way of saying this is not the Wild Wild West. We have an airport. When I go out there every time, people pull through the gates. I don't want more new rules. The last airport manager basically got run out damn near tarred and feathered. I spoke to him. He couldn't get out of the job fast enough because he went to the Wild Wild West. We've always done it this way. We're a small airport. Leave us alone. We're not maintaining a small airport. We're no longer going to be just GA traffic. We're going to be expanding and making this community stronger, and safety is the number one thing. We have an accident, one road in, one road out. What's the airport they're going to use? I want them to use Wasilla, and I want them to be prepared for that. But you don't just jump on an emergency action plan and say you're going to land at Wasilla when it's not stressed or have the proper stuff. The airport manager, I cannot stress strongly enough. I'll go through these quickly. It's not security as much as rule enforcement. We have rules to keep us safe. We have people out there blocking taxiways. We have cars coming through the gate. How many people know when you're supposed to go through that gate, you stop and you wait for the gate to close? No one does that.
Well, the gate doesn't close.
Well, the gate can and does close if we do the rules properly. But we have GA people who don't want to be GA anymore. They want to be left alone. And I understand that Alaska attitude, but we can expand and be stronger. You don't start a business without having a boss and a manager in charge of it. You don't build a city and not have the roads and the infrastructure coming down from that. So he's going to go. So it's safety, it's supervisoring, it's managing. We have a 20-year plan that we have said many councils. We haven't touched it or moved on that 20-year plan in over 25 years. Now we spent $400,000, give or take, to have a group who can't even show up with 3 months and do what the airport manager is, and that is implement the plan, make sure the plan stays on course, brief the proper committees, brief the proper industries of what's going on out there on a day-to-day. Not this, hey, 20 years, we're going to do a $400,000 investment to see what we're not doing the last 20 years. We know what to do. We're not making up new rules. We're going to hold the rules. Job description, absolutely must have a job description. That's easy peasy. We can't have them self-police out there. They're not self-policing. They're parking their motorhomes. They're parking their boats. They're parking their trailers. They're parking junk. They're blocking taxiways. They're not allowing stuff to move through. If we're going to have maintenance and stuff going on, we have to have proper managing of that airport. We can't move forward with a 20-year plan without a manager. I'll go through these. The frame and the structure, security's not the top. He's not Barney Fife out there. He's just helping everybody out. And the number one thing is safety and serving the public, talking to the people, knowing the people, and not being out there as a cowboy trying to bust chops. But hearing what people say about businesses. Hey, we'd love to have this parking spot because our business is right here. Could we possibly have this spot? And then you manage that, and you have other people move different spots. You manage having people throw down asphalt and get your tail feathers dirty. We have to have somebody who knows and speaks aviation that's doing that. It's also relief. We're building and growing. We have a public works director who's got more hats. It's nuts. We can't We can't have a public works being so thinly spread out there. We have air shows we want to throw out. We have 5,100 feet. We could literally take over the North Slope. We can take that cargo business. We can do a heck of a lot and relieve pressure from Anchorage. So we've got to train that horse. We've got to train gently and properly and nicely without making the public mad. He's not out there as a cowboy. He's out there to say, hey, sir, did you know that the taxi speed out here is supposed to be a little bit less? Did you know you're not supposed to do simultaneous operations on the Stoll runway as you're landing on the airport? Did you know if that plane's still on the dirt, you can't take off or land? That happens out there all the time. Yippee-ki-yay. That airport out there is out of control, and I watch it every day. I know, you guys grimace. I got 28 years experience. I run the busiest single runway in the world. This airport needs managing. It doesn't have to be tough. It's not tough. You help people out. You walk up and say, hey, sir, do you happen to notice this? Because I'm not, or the manager's not the FAA. But if the FAA rolls in, Homeland Security rolls in, they're not going to give us the funding unless we have the proper procedures that are already passed, already been sent out by the FAA. If we're not doing those, we're not going to get the monies. We're not going to build it. So I got a whole laundry list I will not get into, but we have got to get that horse trained. And I know it's going to be interesting to go out there in the wild west of Alaska and tell people, I know you've done it this way for 20 years. I've been flying since you were a pup. Fantastic.
If you got a laundry list, bring it up, because I'm going to give public comment here in a minute, and if we
No, we could, yeah, it won't be, it's rebuttal time. This is what we want to do. We want to have this discussion. We want to see where I'm not seeing what I don't see. I want to have people out there at the airport safe. I want to have dogs on leashes if they're walking their dogs at all. We're an airport, guys. We're not a dog park. We're an airport. We're not an RV parking spot. If somebody's out there and wants to park the RV for a special reason, there's understanding for that. We've got transient parking so far back from the fuel pits, transients don't want to come here. They want to go to Palmer, get their gas and park. So there's ways to manage an airport efficiently that, quite bluntly, GA pilots don't care about. They just want to get up there, get out, and go fly. But you got helicopters out there, very good size. Mr. Saloy's got a hell of a size helicopter, and I see aircraft entering the downwind with the helicopters. Oops. Again, that just takes a nice friendly, hey, I'm just letting you know. Right-hand patterns, left-hand patterns. That's something an airport manager can do that doesn't get FAA involved whatsoever. We keep it on a community level, help each other out. All right. Keep going, go.
So, I agree that it's important to make sure that we have some type of structure. I feel like that it seems pretty extreme to look at hiring a new position that's fully, that we have to find funding for and work through the logistics of that. I think the heart of it is essentially just reducing liability, reducing things that could be problems in the future, and to create structure for the airport. I think everybody that is at the airport is in favor of that, and it seems to be a lot of involvement with the stakeholders at the airport. One thing that or an alternative idea that I might suggest is I've seen other airports, mostly private airports, but there's some that I've heard of that have put together essentially volunteer groups that gather together people who are interested in being involved with the airport, and they volunteer on certain nights where they'll drive around and they'll basically just interact with the community that's there. Couple hours in the evening. It's not a huge deal. There are a little bit of structure to it. They have meetings. They talk about issues that are pressing for that time. But it might be something that we could get a little bit of funding in order to get some magnetic decals for cars and flashy lights and things like that. But and to allow the community to be involved with not just creating, but also enforcing the rules, and not just putting it on one individual that needs to be paid for and funded. I don't know if that's an option of having a volunteer group for a public utility or public property, but
Yeah, that's totally allowed. I mean, we have camp hosts at the Lake Wasilla campground that are
yeah.
volunteers basically, and they're get some free rent and board, you know? So, I mean, I think it's an interesting idea. What do they call themselves at those?
So like at where I own a hangar at Wolf Lake, it's the Wolf Lake Security Patrol.
Okay.
And they drive around, and usually they'll interact with the people that are there, and they'll talk. It's usually just kind of a way for a lot of new people that move in. They'll join the security patrol in order to get to know the people around where, you know, they have property or where they're operating. And I think that Wasilla might be a good candidate for that because it's not quite big enough yet, but we're starting to get into that territory of having to mitigate risk. So I know that the structure of that is a bit different, but it also is a way to get the community involved with making rules as well and enforcing them and getting constructive dialogue for what the airport will look like. That's an alternative.
My take on it is that we don't have the infrastructure yet that actually requires a manager at this point. Once we start developing the other side and the volume of large aircraft start picking up, absolutely you're going to want a manager.
Well, I think one aspect that we haven't really kind of talked about is like the business management of it, right? So we have a substantial waiting list for tie downs, but when you go out to the airfield, there's a lot of empty tie downs, and you know, I don't want to offend anyone with the parallel, but it's like having a harbor master. Harbor master does daily rounds, or their staff do daily rounds, look at boat numbers, and in the nautical world, if you are leaving your slip for more than a few days, the harbor master expects you to tell them, and he might put someone else in there. And so, right now we have, kind of a game of cat and mouse where people will move from empty spot to empty spot because no one's watching tail numbers. And so, I'm not saying we need to get a airport manager just for that, but it's those, routine, accountable oversight things that are going to need at some point. And I agree there. I think in kind of like the rule creation, adoption, testing process, it also makes sense to plan for upholding, or having gates basically that say we've addressed these things, now we feel we're ready for this. Like I don't want to wait until a big client shows up and then we say, here's your airport manager. I want to kind of ease into it so the local users who've been there for a long time are, it's normal to them, and then we're welcoming to the things we're hoping expansion will bring.
Yeah, and the airport manager is not there to bust chops on the airport. He's there to defend the airport with the people there, to come discuss it with the city of why we need something or why we might need more water or need the gravel pit fixed properly and that kind of stuff. So he's more of an advocate for the community.
Yeah, I
than he
agree.
is a Barney Fife out there dressing chops.
Because we know that, if you just think about funding, it's going to be incredibly expensive. It is. And so to say, if the council were to say, oh, well, go ahead and do it, but just save it up yourselves, that's never going to be mathematically possible. So it's going to be an advocacy position as well to say, do you realize the economic value of an airport? It needs more funding. There is this thing that we need to do that can only be funded from the balance in the general fund. It's not in the enterprise fund, and advocate for that, along with the Airport Advisory Commission.
Yeah, you don't build the buildings and realize you got to put the plumbing in afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and so like to have the confidence to say we're going to go and expand the big 70-acre parcel. Well, I don't want to put a bunch of wells and septic tanks in there. I can't have the density then, and it's outdated. Talked about a lot of hats. To have a system that is water and sewer system that's built like that is not sustainable. It was cheap. It's why the valley was developed the way it was, but it's not the way we can survive anymore. We can't manage that level of density. It's too remote. It's not dense enough. So that means we need to bring those facilities and that infrastructure all the way in. That's very expensive at first. It's going to take a long time for that return on investment, but that's okay because city is going to be here for forever. And so if it's a wise fiduciary decision, and we can show that it will pay itself back in 20 or 30 years, but during those 20 and 30 years, those parcels are making businesses for our residents, bringing in sales tax, making Wasilla a place to be known. If you want those parts, you go to Wasilla because there's a whole hub there. We've got all these manufacturers here now because we've built this community. That's why the city has the purview, right? That's why it needs to have the support of the users and the city council to make that long-term decision.
Mr. McKay, we've kind of ignored you on the phone. Do you have anything you want to add for now? Or wait for later?
Nope, I'm good. I'm just sitting here listening.
Okay. We're on the 9.4. We'll go to 9.5, lease appraisals and lot expansion.
We've talked a lot about this already. One of the things I just wanted to touch on was I expect, in the next few years at least, minimum, we will have more lease lots available. And going through the way the lease documents are written, they don't really lend themselves to adequately address the true market value of lease lots. They're very passive. The language just says the city council may look at increasing the rates no more than 5 years, every other 5 years, right? So that doesn't bring a fiscal accounting to what it's worth. And so those are some of the changes that I'm looking to make through our legal departments on having it be regular and routine. And I want to use an appraisal process where we have a licensed commercial appraiser with airport experience to look at it and give all of our users as years of advance notice. You'll be up in 3 years, but pay attention to what's happening to the renewals now. But the city leadership expects the airport to be on par with the market. FAA expects the airport to be on par with the market. And so there's some old verbiage that needs to be improved upon. So anyway, that'll happen at some point, but it's just kind of a heads up. And we've already talked a lot about lease lot expansion, so it's basically what I had intended for 9.5.
All right. No comments from here. Public comments, number 10.
I'll make a comment. Big audience here.
So if you want to address the committee, please come forward, state your name. You got 3 minutes. And first and last name, sorry.
All right, first name Joseph, last name Wizakowski. And Doug and I own a hangar out there at the Wasilla Airport. I'll fill out the rest of that here in a minute. One thing, you're talking about bringing in large aircraft, and one thing I have noticed out there is a King Air 200. I mean, that's a pretty big airplane, especially for this airport. And I see him at Wolf Lake Airport. I live close by over there as well. I'm shocked that they're going into that airport as well. I think instead of targeting like the Anchorage airport, a more appropriate target is going to be more like Merrill Field with what they do with supplying some of the remote villages and all the commercial operators out of whether carrying their caravans or King Airs or whatever it is. I think that the target shouldn't be the Anchorage airport. You should be looking more at Merrill Field and what they have. That's going to be way more appropriate and a lot more attainable than to think that we're going to be supplying the North Slope out of Wasilla. I think that's kind of a pipe dream.
You worked out there, right?
And so that's what at least, from my point of view, at the Wasilla Airport, as far as what the target should be, to think that you're going to go up against Anchorage, I think that's ridiculous. I think Merrill Field is certainly, Merrill Field's totally built out. I mean, there's not much more left expansion-wise there. And there's a lot of incredibly great businesses that would love to come out here, but as long as you make it worth their while. Now, if you start jacking rates and, you know, some of the things that you're talking about, that's going to make it a whole lot less attractive. But I think Merrill Field is what Wasilla should be looking at. We could be Merrill Field. And that's an incredible, I was just down there today, and the amount of traffic there is incredible. The flight schools and all the things going on there. But anyways, that's my comment. I'll finish. You want to say something?
Doug Kelchbeck from Palmer, and I'd add that Joe's son worked out there. He spent quite a bit of time out there, and the constraint has already showed itself. There's been a couple of flight schools moved out to Palmer because of the constraint down there. Anyone who's looking for a hanger knows, and we'll go back to the last meeting, that you know, the Merrill Field people have moved up to Birchwood. The Birchwood people have moved up to Palmer. They built some hangars at Palmer. They're gone. Every time a hangar comes up, it's gone. And guess what? We talked about it last time. It was sold. They're gone. So some of the comments that were made earlier, you know, when you engage in rhetoric, I would imagine if we have all these safety problems we talked about, there'd be certainly some accidents that we could talk about that have happened, but I don't know of any. And when we talk about security, well, there'll certainly be a bunch of crimes that we'd know about, but I haven't heard of any. And so when we talk about things like report back, everything I heard in the some of the discussion here has been security guard. Security guard could do that. When you talk about enforcement, well, now you're talking about enforcing FAA regulations. That's, you're out of your lane there. So I would say that if you're going to create an objective, like you talked about, Eric, would be number one, obviously safety. I think Mr. Grogan, I think that's actually right. Safety first. Function, but function based on what do the owners and what do the users want out there. And I look around the commission, and I don't, you know, I hang around the field a lot, and Joe, I think his wife kicked him out. He spends most of his time out there. Don't see many of you guys out there. So I'm wondering about all these problems I hear about. I spent a lot of time out there with mechanics, Darren Spano, Ryan Brett, Adrian, I don't know. Anyhow, a bunch of guys, we spend a lot of time out there. I don't see that all this stuff is problematic. I don't see all these RV owners out there. I see older people walking their dogs, but as someone who cares about the business community, I see potential customers out there. If you start kicking those people out for no reason, and the reason would be when you start from an objective, it's like, okay, when did we have an airplane run into a camper? Have we had that? Have we had a dog killed? Did anybody complain about a dog? I haven't heard any conflict out there from this stuff. So I'm just wondering if sometimes that rhetoric gets ahead of the facts. So, and then that takes me to the next thing. How much have you guys, you know, again, how many commissioners have airplanes out there, spend time out there, own businesses out there? I'm hoping somebody gets out there on the board who owns a business out there. I know Sean McLaughlin, I had a discussion with him about a year and a half that sticks in my head because I was trying to get a hangar built out at Palmer Airport. He owns Alaska Airframes, or Airframes Alaska, I guess it is. And he was going to build on the airport out there, but he couldn't get the city to engage him on a power supply out there. They said, you're going to have to run your own power. And that's why he located off the field. At least that's what he communicated to me. And I think what you guys are doing, I do believe that you can't just, you know, target the big planes tomorrow, but I think it's really smart what you're doing, looking at building the infrastructure so that you can expand into that. But you can't enforce problems that don't exist, or you can, but I think that's a great way to just alienate your user group. And I would submit to you that if you haven't sat down with some of the small business owners out there, had lunch with them or interacted out there, you really don't know what's going on out there and what their needs are. And if there is any of these problems, those are the guys who are going to know, right? Because they've got, I mean, there's some guys coming out there with more expensive hardware every week from Anchorage, from California, and if there was a security problem out there, you'd hear about it. Because these guys have planes that they don't, you know, if you scratch, you're going to hear about it. It's not like some of the old rags that have been worked on in the past out there. So anyhow, the other thing, like, I'm sure someone has talked to Spruce Specialty, because everybody knows about Spruce. They're one of the biggest aircraft, Spruce, right, thank you. They're the biggest parts dealer in the country for small airplanes. One of only 4 locations in the country, and they put one in Wasilla. You've all heard this before. There's a lease on that building out there that I'm sure someone has talked to them about when that lease comes up, what are they thinking of doing, and what would it take to get them out there. I'm sure you've had that discussion. And I'm sure we'd know what, if they don't like RVs out there or people walking dogs off leash, that might be a reason, some reasons I know for not doing that. But, and sit down with Sean McLaughlin and say, hey, what would it take to get you out here? He's maybe never gonna move, but that's a guy who's gotta turn a buck. And that's a guy who walked away from an airport because they didn't have infrastructure or there were things there that he didn't see. But if we're not having these discussions, we can sit here and, say we saw this, say we saw that all day, but, where's the proof? Proof's in the pudding. If no dogs are getting chopped up, no RVs are blocking airplanes, and there's no safety incidents, then I'm not really sure there is a problem. That doesn't mean we shouldn't look smartly at it, talk to the actual guys who are out there and say, what are the problems? I'm sure there's some problems. I'm not saying they're not. But I'm not sure our data collection should be just going out there and maybe taking our experience. I come from the Air Force, and applying what I've seen in the Air Force, limitless funding to Wasilla. And I think it's disingenuous and disrespectful to talk about it like the Wild West out there, because I think if you spend time out there, you realize it isn't. It really isn't. I fly up there, and we're both commercial pilots. I don't see a lot of things going on in the air that I would say are unsafe. But again, I spend time out there. That's just what I see. Your experience may be different. I'll go back again. Every hangar out there is sold. They're building 2 new hangars out there. Tim Rice is building 2 new hangars. They're gone. But I don't want to keep beating that drum. So I guess, just as a friendlier thing, I think you guys need to interact more, because I talked to some of these business owners out there, and we all showed up for the meeting 3 months ago. That was a heck of a showing, but I just think there needs to be more interaction with the actual, on a more granular level, I think. So anyhow, I appreciate your efforts here. Thanks.
All right, so I'm going to go first on a lot of that. You've proven my point perfectly. I appreciate that. It's not rhetoric I'm talking. It's not my 28 years in the United States Air Force that I'm talking about. It's doing it safe. It's doing it right. It's not disingenuous. I was with the FAA. You talk about proof. I've done mid-air collisions on the middle of Wasilla Field. I've scraped the bodies off. So yes, I have seen the accidents out there. The fact that we haven't had more accidents, shake your head, sir. I'm the guy that took it.
If you're going to address the
So,
audience,
I'm going to talk.
We're users.
You're out of order, sir. But I'm saying it's not rhetoric. You say we need to have people to go out and talk to each other. That's an airport manager's job, is to do that. You say we need people to go out and talk to airframes and get them out there. That's the airport manager's job. You say we need to have a guy that goes out and listens to you guys and what you're doing out there. That's the airport manager's job. You say we need to have, who's collecting that data? Exactly. There's not an airport manager out there collecting that data. Who do you go and talk to when you have a problem or have an issue, or the snow's not removed fast enough, or there's too much grass here, or you want something done? There's not your buddy down the street. That's the airport manager's job. There's no rhetoric here.
Those problems, it doesn't seem to me, exist.
Okay, well, again, the security, yes, we've had crimes out there. Yes, we've had windows broken into. Yes, we've had gas tanks left open and gas stolen. So as I sit on this board for the last 3 years, yes, I've heard a lot of people come in here and complain that the security is not there to do that. And again, the airport manager isn't the security guard. The airport manager is the guy there to collect the data and say, hey, Wasilla Police, could you please come up here, talk to the city? Could you please come out here a little bit often, more often than 2 to 3 times a week, because we're getting this more. And when that did happen from this committee, then the police did go out there, and as far as I know, most of that thievery has slowed down or stopped. I don't know if it stopped or not. The enforcement, it's not enforcement, it's who is that person you want to talk to? Who's that person that does collect that data that you just talked about for 5 minutes? That's the airport manager's job. Then he presents it to this board, he presents it to the city, and we act on it accordingly. You say we've got King Airs, those are big airplanes. But a lot of the North Slope stuff, I'm not talking about stealing their cargo and all that stuff from Anchorage. I agree, Merrill Field, 100%, they're full. We could be the next place to get all the students out here. We could get a tower or a temporary tower and have a lot more student training. But you can't just do that and throw a bunch of student trainers into, you guys fly into Merrill Field, it's a goat road. And if I'm not mistaken, this year, Merrill Field has limited a lot of how much student training can go on in their tower. A manager knows that, we can get it out here and get that business out here to Wasilla. So when I talk about airport manager, I'm not talking Barney Fife to go out and bust chops and go against you gentlemen out there with hangars and parking spots. It's to help keep that back and forth with the city and getting what we need out there to keep that airport strong and making it grow bigger. Learjets, you want to go 5,100 feet, great, go 6,000. Then you can get a lot more of the business in there. 6,000 makes the big difference.
5,000 feet's plenty.
Well, let's go 8,000 if we're just gonna.
5,000 feet is
We're gonna hold the
plenty.
comments from the gallery. So there's not rhetoric going on here. It's not my pride and my arrogance about being United States Air Force or the Federal Aviation Administration. So I'm not saying that. So appreciate you not waving your hands at me either, sir. If you want to talk offline, I'm glad to sit down and buy you guys a cup of coffee and we can do that. I'm trying to here to make this work, not to bust you guys' chops and have a fight.
Make you personal.
Okay, I know, that's what I'm saying. It's your guys, you're right, it's your airplanes, it's your hangar, it's your community, let's fix it. Or, let's keep it going.
To 11.
Okay, you what?
Back to 11.
Keep me on the street. Okay, so public comments is done. Anybody else? 1, 2? Okay. Staffing commission comments. Somebody wants to get out in the sunshine. Mr. Schaal.
I don't have any more comments for tonight, thank you.
Ms. Nygard.
Comments?
Mr. McCabe.
Yeah, so I'll jump in for a real quick, Jim. So, one of the first meetings that I attended, I think it was Mr. Dietz, reported a 500-gallon theft of turbine fuel from his hangar. That's what sort of generated the discussion on security and theft and that sort of thing. I also think we can't lose sight of the fact that this airport has been upside down monetarily wise. It's been costing the city of Wasilla well over $100,000 a year. And our goal is to try to make it less painful for the citizens of Wasilla who are actually supporting it. I know that many of the airplane owners on the field are not people that live in Wasilla, and we also need to keep sight of that. So the city of Wasilla is essentially subsidizing their use of the field, and we need to be better stewards of the money and the property that the city of Wasilla. So I agree with you, an airport manager could be the key to bringing in more business, such as aircraft spruce or airframes or somebody else. The commissioners can't do it. I kind of object to the idea that I've never been out there. I drive through there 4 or 5 times a week. So, you know, we're doing what we can as the unpaid commissioner, but a paid airport manager on site would do a lot of what, and I'm not even sure who was commenting, but a paid airport manager would do a lot of what he is actually asking that we do. So I agree, kind of made our point. But we have to keep in mind the fact that this airport is a drain on the city of Wasilla, and we need to turn it around, and that's what we're trying to do. And we're begging for them to help us. So hopefully those that park their airplanes there that are out there every day will come up with some good ideas. Maybe they could go talk to aircraft spruce and say, hey, the city of Wasilla is trying desperately to make this airport a going concern so that it doesn't get shut down. And maybe, you know, you'd be interested in opening your business out there. Anyways, thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, sir. Mr. McCarty.
Yeah, I think that's well thought out changes are needed, but we do need to engage the community, and I fully intend on spending more time out there and actually interacting with everybody there to get good comments. So I'm looking forward to continuing to go out and to talk and to figure out what is actually needed and seeing what the status is and what the status is changing into and what it has been. So it's good things.
Mr. Lucas being absent.
Well, I think that, are you supposed to turn this on to talk? Do what? Push the button. Okay. So, I don't think the airport is there to make money. It supports the community on, if you just say the balance sheet, plus or minus, we made this much, we spent this much. The airport isn't there to even break even. It's there to support the whole community. There's a whole lot of pluses that aren't directly obvious on the balance sheet. And I don't think that trying to make the airport profitable, it should be a goal. You can alleviate some of that, but I think that a lot of it is not the goal, is to make a profit for the city or even break even. I think looking at the space that's out there on the airport, so if you go on the east side, there's some commercial lots that we want to move the DC-4 over, and I know the guy in my hangar would like to build a big hangar over there so he can do turbines on both sides of the runway. But you're talking about a very limited amount of space for big buildings over there. There's not very much, and when we start talking about trying to service the slope, you're going to need warehousing, you're going to need a lot more room around the airport, which isn't really even available. So I think that's kind of a dream, maybe being able to service like Merrifield does. That we could take some pressure off of Merrill, with twins and things like that. But I don't see us being a big commercial hub without the support area around the airport itself. So, and I think a manager, I can see exactly where they would be helpful. I think better think through a job description and make it very clear as to what we expect. But as far as it may be a little bit premature at this point, because it's going to take years for the infrastructure to get in place that we're talking about to be on a bigger scale. Anyway.
Thank you, sir. And as far as my comments, I think we've got all the comments. I've got welcome to meet with anybody who wants to talk and work these things out and continue pushing forward for this. One in the back wants to work. Okay, for that, with no further business at hand, I'm adjourning the meeting unless there's an objection. All right, we're out of here at 7:17. Have a great evening. Enjoy the sunshine. Yeah, by the comment.
Kevin,